There we go. Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome, 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 welcome to a fantastic panel event that I've been waiting and excited for since November of last year, literally. So I feel like this has been a long time in coming, and it's just so wonderful to see everyone here tonight. So first, I want to start off by saying Happy International Women's Day to everyone, to all the amazing women in our lives. Great. Now, tonight, again, we have a really special panel event. This is building up from a mini-series that we, Giles, my lovely co-host, and I have led from November of last year, and we kicked this off with Nigel, and it's what we called Organizational Complexity mini-series. And we started it off with Nigel, who spoke with us about a statement that organizational complexity is human-derived, and it was quite, it was very, very interesting. and from that session, Mike Leving, so I see you, and hi, Mike. Mike asked some really thoughtful questions there. And so huge shout out to Mike. Thank you for your poignant questions, because that's what got all this going, starting to shape it from November last year. Then Dave Snowden, who sends his apologies. Unfortunately, he can't be here with us today. Really sorry for this last minute change of plans, but he's with us in spirit. He gave the second talk in the mini-series on an ecological approach to leadership in Agile. Then about a month or so ago, Simon Wardley came in and took it home for us with Organizational Complexity and Wardley Mapping. And now we've culminated that mini-series into this panel tonight, touching on the topics of AI and machine learning, and how does that impact complexity or not? So we're going to do it in a style that Nigel suggested to us called Infinite Monkey Cage, if any of you know that, where we just, have a very deep topic that's discussed, but then have some fun with it, right? Bring it back up a level and just have a good night tonight together. So tonight you've got my lovely co-host Giles and I emceeing and co-facilitating the session. I'll go into some intro of the panelists, and then we're going to go through 4 seed questions and open up to some light touch Q&A during these 4 questions, but then we'll also save the bulk of the Q&A at the end as well in the normal ALN style, where please go ahead, type your questions in the chat, and we'll, Giles and I will help facilitate these during the course of the event. And then at the end, we'll have time, and then we'll use the raise hand functionality, and people can come off on mic, come on camera, and ask their questions directly to the panelists. We hope to close in about 90 minutes or so, give or take. And that's how it's going to run tonight. So, look, I don't know if I need to do much of an introduction for the panelists, but because you guys are just so awesome. But who we have tonight is Kareth Foster, who for over 2 decades, she's taken her passion for entertaining and critical thinking nationwide, from the airwaves to organizations, universities to corporations, creating a seismic shift in mindsets and revolutionizing the way we address issues of leadership, diversity, and wellness. She's the CEO of Inversity Solutions and founder of The Frame, Foster Russell Alliance on Meaningful Expression, whose mission is to inspire free speech, inclusion, social change, and empowerment through education and mentorship on college and university campuses. She is author of the book, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy. So please get yourself a copy. I just bought mine. Fantastic. Kareth, we're so happy to have you here with us tonight. We also have Nigel Thurlow, who's the creator of award-winning Scrum, the Toyota Way training course, co-author of Flow System with John as well. He previously served as the first ever Chief of Agile at Toyota, leading lean and agile practices at Toyota Connected. He's also led numerous digital and organizational transformation initiatives at Toyota and is recognized as an expert in the Toyota production system, the Toyota Way, and a whole host of agile approaches. So happy to have you here with us, Nigel, especially since you kicked this off for us back in November. And last but not least, we have John, again, co-author and creator of the Flow System. He is an associate professor at the University of North Texas for the Department of Learning Technologies and College of Information. He serves as the editor-in-chief for Performance Improvement Quarterly Journal His research and interests are in team science, team cognition, leadership, performance improvement, knowledge management, theory building, complexity theory, whole bunch of awesome stuff in short. John, so great to have you with us. And again, co-author of the Flow System. So that's who our panelist is tonight. And again, for the QA, please go ahead and type directly into the chat. Giles and I will facilitate this, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So without further ado, panelists, are you ready?
Yeah, because Dave's not here, so we get to give everything we say will be right, and nobody will challenge us. I noticed Anna was there, so I'm just waiting to see how many people leave now. They know Dave couldn't come. Apparently, he's doing really important work with the UK Staff College at this, trying time for everybody. So I think he's excused relatively well. So, Ashley.
And I actually thought, Ashley, you were about to ask, are gladiators ready after asking if the panel were ready? I suddenly thought, yeah, exactly. It sounded exactly like you were about to do an intro to a TV show. So,
are you not entertained?
right. I'm going off Spotlight.
I'm going to go off Spotlight in a second too. So, right. First question, panelists. Nigel, if you could kick us off, please.
Yeah, I'm laughing at what Steve Brown's saying. He says 7 people have joined since the announcement that Dave can't come. So
get it on social
there's going to be loads
media.
of digs at Dave all throughout this. So when he watches his back, So and I just want to tell everybody, I'm so pleased that Karith agreed to participate in this. I've known Karith for a few years. I met her at Toyota when she did an impromptu comedic moment. People don't realize probably that Karith is an exceptionally funny lady from her comedy career and background, not to lessen the fantastic work she now does. So I'm expecting this to be a riot, an absolute
no pressure
at all.
And, you know what, you should have said that earlier and made sure everybody had a 2-drink minimum before we started this.
Something like that. So
maybe we'll take an intermission.
So the question, I've had to load up the Google Doc, which is good, but the first question that was asked is, if you remove all people in a problem, is it still a complex problem? And then it goes on to say, how does artificial intelligence and machine language affect complexity and challenge that paradigm? Now, I made a statement some time ago. I actually made it the first time I was in Poland doing a presentation for the Lean Institute, which was a lot of fun. And I stuck this slide up and I sort of put this I posited this idea that all organizational complexity is human derived. And if we remove the humans from the organizations, none of the problems that remain are complex. Now, a lot of people in this audience are big practitioners, or at least students of complexity thinking. And really, so I'm not going to go into defining complexity too much, but then, as you say, one of our audience asked, then what happens when you put AI and machine learning, not machine language, machine learning into that mix? So that was my thought, that humans create their own complexity. And if you remove the humans, the whole construct of complexity seems to go away, at least within organizations. I'm not talking about novel events such as, earthquakes, tornadoes, and this type of thing that are beyond our control. I don't know, who of my illustrious panel, my panelist colleagues, would like to pick that up and run with it?
I'll go first, because I hate to say that I agree with you. Not that I hate to say I agree with you, but what you're saying absolutely makes sense. I love agreeing with you. I just wanted to, since Dave's not here. But, we as humans, obviously, our blessing and our curse is that we are so complex. But I wonder if, and I know we're probably getting to this a little bit later on in the questions, but is it all really completely removed if humans have had a part in contributing to the AI aspects of it? Like, is the complexity completely wiped out? Like, are we sure about this 100%?
Is AI causing complexity or added complexity? John, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think complexity, so you have natural systems and then you have human systems. natural systems, you'll still experience complexity. I mean, the destruction of the dinosaurs was a complex event that no human had any control over. So complexity does occur in natural without humans, but I think, so that's the natural part. But on the human side, things really like Drucker and Ackoff, they both kind of identified that in organizations, somewhere around 80% of the problems that managers, leaders experience are really routine problems. The other 20 are really more novel or complex problems. So if you can manage those 80% better, then you have more time to focus on the novel, the 20%. And I think in order, from what we've seen with some of the organizations that we work with, and some of the literature shows that most of the time is spent on these routine problems because the processes and the systems that we put in place make it more complex than it should be. And then we've also seen times where biases are put into these processes, whether it's in AI or some just regular human processes, that make it even more diverse and more complex. So when the humans can cause it to be more complex rather than keeping it complicated.
So that's
John,
interesting.
would
We'll get to, I'm sorry,
Nigel,
Ashley,
can
go
I
ahead.
just clarify real quick? John, what's your definition between, what's the difference between complicated and complex, just before maybe going into a bit more detail about that? How do you define them?
Well, when we're looking at problems, it's really, if you know the problem and the solution, then it's more simple.
Okay.
If you know the problem and you may have questions on the solution, but you have access to someone such as an expert who knows the solution, then that's more of a complicated problem. Complex is really when you're not sure what the problem is. That's where the unknowns come in. And then if you don't know the problem or the solutions, then you get into more wicked type problems. So some may claim that complex problems and wicked problems may be the same, and some differentiate between the two. But the main differentiator is you really don't understand what the problem is, and you don't know what the solution is because you don't really understand the problem.
And I would say complicated is annoying and complex is intriguing.
Ooh. So Ashley, because you asked that question, and I know I got caught out with this before, I brought up what Dave wrote in the paper. One of the book reviews or something we wrote some time ago. Dave described the complex domain as one where all actors and objects are entangled in many ways that cannot be fully understood. Everything is connected, but the impact of change cannot be predicted. And of course, when you get into chaos, everything is random by definition. So that's really the complex domain. Whereas if you're in the complicated domain, I would argue that things are well understood by the agents in the system. They may require expertise, but there's not this unknown aspect to it, or at least we know what the unknowns are and are able to solve them, where when we get into the complex space, it really is unknown unknowns, or even what is the phrase that I think Dave coined, which is unknowables. So from that perspective, that's how I'm differentiating complexity as opposed to things that are non-complex. But when we start to look at the fact about, AI and machine learning sort of getting involved in that, part of me starts to think, well, hold on. If the humans have gone into this system and they've created this entanglement, this complexity, and this thing that cannot be fully understood, and even when you know all the people and the players and the agents in the system, we still don't understand it all. Now we start seeding machine learning with some knowledge, algorithms, some sort of initial, and we can talk about biases later, but something initial from our own thought processes. And then this thing starts to learn. Is AI going to now make it even more complex, or is it going to help us untangle that complexity? I don't know. What do my colleagues think on this panel? Or is that a hard question?
I was going to go back to when we talk about artificial, what is artificial? Right.
Now,
So
this
we're
was
looking at-
reminding me of a conversation yesterday, John, when we were talking to somebody about whether a rock has agency. So,
right. Yeah.
how would you
Well,
define
I
artificial?
wouldn't go that far, but I mentioned the difference between natural and lived experience. So lived experience is more, the lived environment is more the natural, right? The designed environment is more the perceived side of things. And the intersection between the two may be the artificial.
So the dictionary definition of artificial, because I looked it up while you were talking, is made or produced by humans rather than occurring naturally. So if we create our own complexity, assuming I'm even right, and Dave says I'm not, but he's never told me why I'm not. But if we create our own complexity, and then we create the artificial intelligence, don't we seed it with that same complexity? I don't know. I knew this would go deep really quickly.
Yeah.
It did. I love how people are saying anything a human makes is artificial, except obviously for other humans. Although I know some incredibly artificial and superficial people. So maybe even there, that's true.
So, wow. Any, have we got, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about this premise that complexity is human derived? John, you said about 80% of most things being relatively routine, may need some expertise, and 20% being novel. Have we got any examples of what we might think are novel events or novel things within organizational systems? I'm talking about human systems as opposed to natural systems, assuming there's even a distinction.
When you get into more of the design thinking, creativity, that's more driving the novel creative processes. And so that's not routine, that's more novel.
This is making me think of what's happening right now in the DEI realm, right? Like an entire industry now has been built on talking about diversity. Yet, how do we actually really define what diversity is? Diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of people, right? And everyone kind of gets to pick what those definitions mean for them, which obviously makes it incredibly complex. But would there be any way to incorporate a system? Like I just received an email on LinkedIn from someone who says that she's met somebody who's found a program to take the bias out of recruitment. Is that really possible?
Assuming that we put the bias into it to begin with, because I'm assuming the thing didn't generate its own bias because we create these artificial. Yeah. Ooh, we're jumping ahead here, Ashley. So,
All right.
I don't know. I'm going to hand it back to you. I don't know. I mean, sorry, John,
similar
go ahead.
to the intelligence survey. So originally when the intelligence survey was first introduced, it was validated, but then when it was tested on a different culture, it didn't show the same validation results because it's a different culture. So DEI or any other main construct in one setting, one type of environment will take on a different meaning in another environment. So that's the environmental portion that you really need to encapsulate when you're looking at how these complex issues play out. They play out different in different parts of the world. And when we're in between the two worlds, then you really need to look at all factors involved and how it plays out on both ends. That's more the boundary spanning role, right?
Oh, we can't bring that in. That's another concept we'll bring in at some point to the conversation. I'm just reading some of the comments in the channel. There's some good links that people are posting, and Ray was saying that complex and complicated problems are not along a scale. They are two different types of problems. I don't know, because if you look at Cynefin, we have the liminal boundary where we have, and liminal means this transitional area, this transitional zone. So are we sure that these are either or or not can we not move in this transitional state from one to the other? I thought that was the aspect of sense making within Cynefin. I'm sure you put some more in the chat.
John asked a good question too about the distinction between supervised and unsupervised machine learning, where unsupervised can reveal patterns in organizations in nature, such as astronomy or protein folding.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking about when we talk about, I understand the question, but again, what we're talking about when we're sort of researching interplanetary life, or we're researching things within the universe using unsupervised machine learning, we're asking the machines to go and look for certain patterns, learn from those patterns, and give us some form of, I assume, some form of interpretation or synthesis from them. Now, there's still going to be human biases in there, but that's very much different than if we're asking an artificial platform to look at human interactions, human behaviors, and make decisions about humans. I think the context is important there. I don't think the problems are any different. The impacts may be very different. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. John, Gareth, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. I scroll through the questions. Or maybe we could move to question 2. Actually,
that's what I was just going to say. You're talking about the impact, but actually, to get to the impact, and Mike, let's come to you. Let me kick off question 2, if that's okay, and then we'll come back to that. So, because we have a set of building questions, right? So, question 2 to the panel, just to move things on, is what's the difference between humans and computers and reasoning and decision making? And just to let you know, so what we're building up to is what's the difference between how we reason and make decisions, and then the next question goes on with the topic of biases and heuristics. So we'll get to that in question 3, but I'm sure it will evolve as we go through question 2. But Gareth, did you want to kick off thoughts on that question?
I would, because I know, there are different avenues for how we come to our decisions, right? We listed on our exchange that there's the abductive. You're going with your gut, your what you're feeling, what your body's telling you, your heart, your mind. Deductive, using facts. Inductive, no facts. I personally feel that we would be very remiss not to talk or even include part of this conversation, intuition, which is something that a lot of people use. We should probably be using it a lot more, because there are things that we know we don't trust ourselves with. And intuition is, this may be a little controversial, but it's yes, our thoughts and ideas, but I also believe that it's connected to a higher source, whatever you want to call that source. And so that is definitely something that a computer program does not have or cannot do, as far as using it as a tool to make decisions. And that's probably the biggest.
No, Gareth, I was just looking again, because intuition is the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. And I was thinking about some of the recordings we made with Dave and others on the OODA loop, and how we make decisions, and I'm sure John will have a lot to add on the decision-making side of things, because that's the focus of a manuscript that's in process at the moment. But if we are talking about, computers, I grew up on computer science when I was a much younger kid, and went through my university years doing computer science, which was all about logic, all about and or, and lots of other gates and things. It was just about simple logic triggers. We're talking about intelligence now. And whilst we would say that humans are capable of logical thought, they're also capable of illogical thought, and indeed being able to process things without conscious reasoning. And we're responding to external inputs and triggers, but also our internal experiences, the things that our culture, our backgrounds, our cognitive diversity, everything that makes us who we are, enables us to make a determination, to make a decision. Can a computer have that same capability? I'm going to leave it there.
don't
Let
know
somebody
what
else
to say.
pick that up.
John, pick
John,
it
is that
up.
you, John?
Well, I think in line with what Corinne was saying, intuition, but more in line with emotions and current research from DiMaggio. He's looking at emotions as the bridge between the body and brain. So the Cartesian dualism looked at body mind as separate. So the body was reflexive and Pavlov's dog and so forth. For centuries, that was everything. Behavior is a function of your reaction to the environment, right? But then the more we learned about the mind and the brain, it's more like, well, we can plan and we can behave based on those future plans, right? But then they've been really researching the two separate areas, but putting them together, DiMaggio's really shown that they are part of a whole larger system, and really the emotions could be the connector between the reflective and the mind, and the emotions really combine the whole system together as a comprehensive system. And so our computers model what we think how the human brain operates in many ways, and that's from the input process output model and information processing models, that they're all modeling computer programs based on how we think the brain operates and functions. But as we learn more with how the brain actually functions, then we learn more how computers work and vice versa. So they're separate functions, but I think the computer really kind of follows the brain as we learn more about the neurological side of things. Will they be one and the same in the future? Possibly, but I think the computer will eventually have to stem off and be a process in and of itself, rather than trying to be similar to what the brain does. But that's how I see the future, possibly.
So I'm thinking about, for the folks joining us from the Southern Hemisphere, there's I think he's a real professor who does a call-in podcast on Triple J in Australia called Dr. Carl, Karl. And he makes me laugh, and I've listened to his podcast for years, and sometimes it's really funny and other times it's not so funny. He won an Ig Nobel Prize when he which is like the comical Nobel Prizes, and he won that for determining how you got belly button fluff. So to give you an idea of the sort of science phone-in and podcast he does. But he talks about the body having multiple brains, and even on the BBC they talked about the stomach being a second brain in the body, because it's capable of making decisions. It's got neurons, neural pathways and things, and there's no connection to the actual thing in our skull telling it how to operate. So that sort of takes us down an interesting conversation, which is where, you know, to what you were talking about, the Cartesian stuff, John, about how the fact that things maybe, the connections between them may have been understood better now, but certainly we are capable of parts of our bodies making independent decisions. So how about when we shove that into AI? How about when can AI then make decisions that are unique and independent and disconnected from our original human programming? What's your thoughts on that?
I think the decision support system, the DSS, which is from the computer side, and that's where they make decisions, computational decisions. I think support system is the right term here, because it supports human decision making. It doesn't replace it. And so these systems help provide alternative solutions when people and groups are trying to make decisions, but it doesn't replace. Now, I think we should get to the point where we replace human decision making. We just augment human decision making, and so that humans can make better decisions with these support systems and with other processes that we use, like using group diverse input to make decisions rather than independent decisions, getting all the information necessary, required to make an accurate decision, and then use these support systems to do that.
So I was just reading the question that was posed to us about, and I'm not keeping up with the chat, so I'm hoping that Giles is actually keeping up with the chat when I'm thinking about all this. But, you know, we talk about the three types of reasoning. We've got deductive reason, which is facts. So a computer can look at facts. They can have stored facts, facts that have been derived from other information, and make a decision. And from an inductive point of view, from based upon our observations that help us to reason, then I guess for external sensors and other types of digital wizardry, artificial intelligence could potentially make an inductive decision or somehow carry out some form of experiment to validate what it was thinking based upon inputs and make a decision. I'm stretching this a bit, and I'm sure the audience will have a great deal of fun with this. But assuming that AI could be both deductive and inductive, could it be abductive? Could really AI make a decision based on a gut feel, that intuition, that logic of the hunches? Could it just say, I don't know, I think this? Gareth, this is one for
I'm
you.
listening because I'm pondering this because I feel like that's an excellent question. I don't feel that I have enough information on, maybe the technology that is there at the moment, but everybody's talking about the heart being the stomach being another brain, but we've neglected to say that the heart is actually a little brain as well. The heart has over 40,000 neuroreceptors that operate, think, feel, respond differently from the brain, which is why when someone dies, even though maybe they're not in pain anymore, it still hurts. Like our brain knows it's better that they're out of pain and somewhere else, wherever that may be. But the heart still hurts when you're in a relationship with someone, and it was a toxic relationship. Your heart still hurts because you've had those feelings there. Can a machine through AI help people make decisions on whether or not to move forward or do things? Like I personally don't believe that there is any technology that will replace the heart ever. Although, so I saw somebody make a comment that said maybe AI should take over soon because people are getting stupider.
I've got a curveball question for you guys, for the panelists. So we're talking about AI and machine learning, and we're talking about cognition, right? And thought processes as separate things. But what about merging them together? I think several years ago, Elon Musk made this controversial statement that humans must become cyborgs if they're to stay relevant in a future dominated by AI. So just throwing out a third path option. Just to keep
working on that now. I mean,
that's fresh.
Right.
What about putting chips in, and you don't need to separate out the heart to bring the technology in?
Has anybody watched Star Trek in recent years? That's not a good thing,
Well,
just
part of that human computer interaction, right? And if you look at Andy Clark's work, he talks of the extended mind, right? How many people can now pull up a phone number without looking at their phone, right? That's an example of the extended mind, right? We use and rely on our cell phones more and more today because we can't remember phone numbers for the people that we used to remember, but have by memory, right? 20 years ago, before smartphones came about, if you're old enough to remember that day. So there's that extended mind. So we rely more and more. And there are research where they're putting chips into the brain so that you can move things through electronics, through thoughts, without having to actually move it by hand like a joystick or stuff. So that is possible, but that's a long ways out. But today we have that extended mind, is what I would say, and a lot of so. Pardon?
Is it a long ways out, John?
Well, when the chips are in our brains to actually operate and mechanical systems.
Like how far out do you think that is? I'm just curious because I'm kind of an outsider in this world in some respects.
I would guess we'd probably see it in 20 years, maybe on the commercial side of things. I'm just guessing, but that's really
That's not a
my-
long ways out. 1980
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
it's like
that's true.
47 years ago. That wasn't a long way. Like, you know what I mean? Like you hear an Aha song or Duran Duran, you're like, oh, that was yesterday. It was, almost 40 years ago. Like that's not a long, 20 years is like a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we do have technology which is allowing us to use electromechanical devices linked to our internal nerve system and our way of operating. You see there's some fantastic stuff going on, not just with eyesight, but also with people who've lost limbs or motor functions. And there are even some fantastic experiments going on about being able to correct paralysis in different ways. So that technology is there. Will it replace the need for us to think or make decisions? And will we have, and I was reading some of the comments and I agree with Giles, there's so many good comments in there. We need an open forum. We need a lean coffee session, not a bunch of panelists waffling on, but basically, things like, I'm reading what David Geiser said, anything a human makes is artificial. When a rock has agency, does it become a rock star? Thanks for that, Marcus. And I'm just scrolling down a few of these things, but there was one that there was one about, that's it. Computers don't have a limbic system. It made me think of, you start with Y guy, Mr. Cynic, because he always used to talk about the limbic nerve or something, but which is along the same lines of intuition. So, computers don't have intuition. Could they develop intuition? I mean, my knowledge of machine learning and artificial intelligence is limited. I'm not a coder anymore. I don't develop code anymore. I don't have the skills that I used to have way back in the 70s and 80s. And thanks for Carith for reminding me how damned old I am. But the thing is, this artificial intelligence there was nothing like, if I could make my Sinclair ZX81 bleep, that was as much intelligence as I could summon out of computer code back then. But could we see computers developing intuition or developing that gut feel, making a decision based on a hunch? What's it going to take to cross that sort of barrier? Because I sometimes joke about the rise of AI and stuff, and say, because I do a lot in the lean thinking world, and I say eventually the machines will rise and consider humans wasteful and just remove us because we have no value anymore. And that's sort of the dangers that Hawking and other people had thought about in years gone by, and I don't consider myself anywhere near as clever as those people. But that does make me wonder whether or not eventually, as Skynet becomes a thing, the machines decide we are just pointless, or whether they build the equivalent of the Matrix and use us as fuel to keep this experiment going. Something that just some ideas I'm throwing out there. Feel free to stop me at any point.
No, Nigel, are you asking, is it possible for AI to get access to our God spark? Right? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think that's probably, you've phrased it a lot better than I did.
I hope not. Because that's the part of that's in our DNA, right? Like I watch a gentleman named Greg Braden, who it was someone who had introduced me to heart math and the whole idea of the heart, being a little brain. And he talks about, what we have in our DNA, what separates us from every, as humans, from even other animals that's in our DNA, and it's that God spark. And even from, when you go back and you're looking at, what the paleontologists have found and different types of species that were humanoid, but there's still something different in us right now. And the term, I guess, is, like I said, kind of God spark. And is that possible to take that or create that or achieve that for AI? I don't know. I hope not.
I hope that's more than 20 years off. John's boy. Mike, I know that you raised your hand about 20 minutes ago. I'm wondering, would you like to launch a question into the panel now, especially since you're the person who sparked the idea for the panel to begin with?
Thank you, Ashley. It's kind of less of a question, although I'll end with a question and just a couple of things. So when we talk about AI, and appreciate that you guys may or may not have expertise in this, there are three forms of AI. So we have narrow AI, general AI, and super AI. And I think we need to differentiate these. And maybe just to disambiguate that a little bit, I'll just read you something that compares 5 properties of narrow AI versus general AI, which I think will help with this discussion. So narrow AI, the 5 points that were made here is it's inferior to human intelligence. It's also known as weak AI. It lacks artificial consciousness or cognitive abilities. IBM Watson, AlphaGo, Google Assistant are some examples. And it can't solve unfamiliar problems, which is why it's narrow AI. It's very good at solving things that it has context for and it's learned, but it's very bad at taking that learning and applying it in a different context. As opposed to general AI, which is similar to human intelligence. So then we're on a par, we're on parity. It's also known as strong AI or full AI. It potentially will have human-like consciousness and cognitive biases, which is another interesting thing we've not discussed, computers having consciousness and when that might happen. Yet to become a reality, but it can solve unfamiliar problems. And I think then narrow AI might be particularly good at solving complicated problems, but complex problems, I think we need general AI to solve. And then just 2 quick things from me as well. There's a very interesting video from Lex Friedman on GPT-4. Go and have a look at that. That's also very interesting. And my last question for you then is, if we can get super AI, and our super AI would be more intelligent than humans by far, and if super AI can bioengineer humans, then do humans become artificial by that definition we had before? That's what I thought.
Mike, that's just phenomenal. You ought to be on this damn panel. In fact, you should be leading this panel at times with some of the things you've come out with in the past. Even the general AI thing worries me to death, because when we talk about consciousness, that's self-awareness, yeah? I mean, that's that it knows it's a thing, yeah?
Yes.
And then to take that even beyond that, you know, as you say, where it becomes the master, we become whatever it determines that we are, possibly waste or fuel or something else of, you know, to better serve its needs. That's terrifying. That's horrific. I'll be dead before that happens, hopefully. But just this concept of consciousness, do we actually believe, and Mike, you can even answer, but I'll ask John and Kareth as well, do we even believe that a machine that we have created, albeit digital, is capable of gaining consciousness, self-awareness, and therefore no longer having a need for us?
And if you want to get on board with predictive programming from Hollywood, then that's coming our way.
John, what do you think? Because I mean, this is, I don't know, this is
the old concept of constructors, not from construction theory, but constructors that can recreate themselves. That goes into the super AI that Mike was talking about. The as far as decision making, so making decisions based on probabilities is more along the lines of the narrow AI that Mike mentioned. But when you get into bringing in new information and reevaluating based on that new information, then you're getting closer to the general AI systems for decision support systems. But super AI is, yeah, that's above my pay grade, right?
Hopefully it's way beyond all our pay grades for now. I really do hope so. But I'm just reading the definition of consciousness, the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings. Now, don't we already have that with AI? Don't we already have, you know, awake, depends how if you think of awake in human terms, but aware of one's surroundings.
Awake, not woke.
Not woke, awake. So the awareness or perception of something by a person, it says, but we've already created a level of awareness in technology and a way to visualize and interpret one's surroundings. So have we already given AI a level of consciousness, not awareness of itself, but awareness of what in the environment in which it operates? It goes on to say the awareness by the mind of itself and the world, but that's another definition within the definitions of consciousness. So that probably somewhere in between that general, we're all floating in that general area, and people are itching to get towards that super sort of intelligence or super AI that were there. But there was Mike had raised something about the biases that we're building into that. So actually, Giles, because of time, I wonder if we should move into question 3.
Great prompt, Nigel. Let's go to question 3. Okay, panelists. What role do our biases and heuristics play into the AI that we're building now and in the future? Feel free to tailor across the 3 categories of AI too.
I was going to say that the bias of the creators will always undoubtedly be reflected in the machines. There's no way that it can't be. There's no way we can take our ideas, our thoughts, our opinions out of something that we create, our history, our experiences. There's no way. And a perfect example, and I'm sure everybody is aware of this, is now with the face recognition technology. There's evidence now that it works way better on people who have lighter, fairer skin tones. And the people who designed it, most of them probably do not have darker skin tones. So that wasn't a consideration.
But Kareth, if you could, if you really, things were properly, good, strong ethics boards, really the tires were kicked before these things were created. In theory, if we're aware of our cognitive biases, because there are loads of tests that you can do to understand what your own cognitive biases are, if we can harness that and bring it together, couldn't we be able to leverage that to help us overcome our own limitations, though?
You would like to think, but again, so much of this is so personal and individual, right? There's a really wonderful book out right now by a man named John McWhorter called Woke Racism. And he talks about the different levels of trying to abolish racism in this country and how we went from, initially, look, people who were brought over and made slaves, they deserve human rights. They're not 3/5 of the person. Then it was about civil rights and how people should be treated and paid equally. But now we're in a new version where it's almost like the script has flipped, right? And there's almost, I don't want to call it reverse racism, but in some respects, there are spaces where if you're not being able to fully understand what a person of color is going through, then you're bad or evil. So there's so many elements to this conversation of bias and unconscious bias and how we have evolved as a society, right? In terms of how we look at things, how we see each other, but also our personal experiences. And so much of, the things that we may put in the racism or the race bank, I even hate using that word because I think there's one race, the human race, is a cultural thing more than an actual color or ethnic thing. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to obviously unpack there, but if it could help, that would be fantastic. Do I have 100% faith that it would? No.
See, that's I've read no end, and we've seen lots of very public examples where computer systems have stereotyped or racially stereotyped people coming through immigration. If somebody's more Arabic looking or dressed in a certain way, the systems have sort of identified them as more of a threat than if I walk through in a suit and tie, which is completely wrong, and history has shown us that. But I wonder, is it possible, here's a thought, is it possible that AI could unlearn the biases that we initially seeded it with? Because that's intelligence. If it's intelligence, could it make a self-determination that the bias that it's been programmed with is indeed not correct, and remove that bias and look at the true, I mean, take the immigration example, take true threat factors, not how a person is dressed. I mean, I sometimes have Amazon delivery drivers come dressed, drive up in a blue van with a blue uniform, and sometimes I have them pull up in a private car that's looking worse for wear and come to the door wearing a tracksuit. I'm even much to be more fearful of the person in the tracksuit than the person in the blue Amazon driver suit. My bias might say yes. My bias may make an interpretation of the person's, social standing, wealth, attitude, education, lots and lots of things that could go into that. And I'm sure that in my life, I've been guilty of this multiple times in the 50 odd years I've been on the planet. But is there a way that AI could learn to understand that these were wrong and remove the biases? That's, I don't know. I'm posing this as a sort of a partly rhetorical question, but I don't know, John, Gareth, what's your thoughts?
But
John, you look like you want to talk. Go.
I think some of our consciousness is selective, right? And it's based on our experiences, and it's based on what we pay attention to, right? So that's our cognitive limitations, right? Then our decision makings are also limited, and especially looking at complex environments, complex problems, we need diversity. And this is where the teams and the social element comes into play, because you need to normalize these biases. So that's where the diversity. So the more diverse you bring into the table to make these decisions, you can normalize these biases. And that's kind of what Nigel was talking about, unlearning AI, unlearning the biases. It's kind of normalizing among the groups, but you don't want to normalize to favor one particular group or another. This also kind of ties into some of the work that I've looked at, where you're looking at multi-agent systems as a team member to reduce the information sharing bias. And so what that is, when you have say you have a team of 4, you have the interactions team member to team member, and not every member shares information to the others. The more vocal, or the one with the more power, is going to share their information, and the others will follow suit. And there's always some members who don't voice their opinions for or against, and that could be minority members, it could be women or new employees, new members of the team, right? But if you have a multi-agent system, an AI element, then everyone can put their opinions in autonomously, and everyone can hear what everybody else has to say. They don't know who said what, so everyone gets to put a voice into the decision. And so it can remove the bias if it's designed and used in the right context.
I have thoughts on this. I don't know if it's possible to remove the bias from people.
Well,
I think we can be aware, right? Like we could, I mean, this is the work that I do. This is what I travel the country. I go into corporations. I teach this. Everybody has bias. We all of us, and it's not a matter of obliterating it, because I don't think that's possible. I just don't, because of our human experience, because of how we see the world, because of how we interact with people, because of our own original thoughts, ideas, and feelings, right? What I try to do is make people aware of it so that they understand when the bias comes into play. It certainly reduces the opportunity for a great relationship, a great experience, a great opportunity. So to, do what you can to keep it in check till you've gotten to learn who this other person is or what another, situation is going to be like. But I don't know if it's possible for humans to eradicate bias and then be able to put that into a program for machines if we can't even do it.
I think that's, the more I think about this, because of course, when we talk about bias, we often think about race, but then there's so many biases in the world. Whether it's culture, background, financial standing, education, gender, color, all sorts of different things that are out there. And even if you just abstract it into business, there's biases in business, there's biases in organizations, nothing to do with the necessarily the human aspect. And Dave, of course, bless him for not being here, but he talks a lot about heuristics, these mental shortcuts So we don't process the information and make a rational decision. We make a rapid shortcut to a conclusion. I mean, I do problem solving in the lean world where people jump from problem to solution and forget all the bits in the middle. Well, we do the same as humans because we want a fast answer, a gratification, or we make an answer based upon some sort of wiring inside. And I wonder whether or not AI will get to that level where suddenly heuristics are in there, not just the biases that we may have encouraged the AI to learn or to use, but also because that's coming back to that level of consciousness or gut feel again. It's that heuristic to make a snap decision. Now, is that going to be based upon our biasing, or is it going to be based upon the way it's learned? I'm trying to keep up with all the chat, and I've been copying some of the key messages. I intend to read a few before we end. Anyway, that's just some of my thoughts there on the heuristics things. I think to bring a bit of levity maybe to this for a bit of fun, and because of time, actually we have that last question, which I know we threw in there, but I think is funny in this very correct world that we have nowadays. So would you like to pose that to us just for a bit of fun? And I'm sure Karen.
Well, yes, Nigel, I would. Thank you. Okay, panelists. What's the pronoun for AI? How do you refer to it?
Or we get input from the audience first and then see what they say.
Oh, I love that. I love that, John.
That's a great idea.
So
type it. Feel free to just call out, unmute yourselves, call it out. Sis, it, intersects.
I like Anna. She actually had a really good point earlier too.
I did write one of those. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm not quite sure what you mean, Steve, because in the US that has a different meaning.
It does. It does.
At least Anna's amused by that.
Any other thought?
Previous comment.
If it's the English term, Nigel, we know it's obviously a gardening implement.
Yeah, indeed, but it doesn't actually.
There you go.
There's just no point.
Way to keep it classy, Giles.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I wrote something the other week and I didn't know how to refer to AI. I mean, it is okay, but when does it stop being it? And does it take on something else? I don't know. Kareth, John, what's your thoughts?
I mean, listen, you can go to Facebook and pick out, I don't know, they've got 60 gender pronouns now you can pick from. I was going with it. And if we were talking about more than one, I thought we could call it either a gaggle or a murder of its.
I like that, because the thing is, does AI have a gender? Because if it's programmed by a man, it may have a certain bias. If it's programmed by a woman, it may have a certain bias. If it's programmed by somebody who doesn't identify as either one or the other, or a variety of different identities, does it then take on the gender pronoun of the person who programmed it? I mean, I know this is a bit
flippant, I can see people arguing for it to have a female gender because it drives things, right? Cars are always girls. Ships are always girls.
And that's male bias, actually. Do you think about that? Because why are all these things, why do we refer to motorcycles and cars and boats as female gender? Because my daughter actually calls her car after one of the characters from Lilo and Stitch. It's called Lilo, and I don't know what the gender of Lilo is. Excuse me for being ignorant on Disney movies and things. But the thing is, this is not the fact that many of these inanimate objects or these creations of humankind have got female gender because of the male dominance previously that decided to refer to them in the female tense. Or is that yet another bias? I don't know. What's everybody else think? I'm looking for helpful.
That's a good question. Well, these are like people are talking, and a lot of things are saying, feminine. There's a lot of feminine, and for the international folks.
I mean, when you take a language like French, which has very distinct female, male gender when it describes, and those are the languages I know. I just have a little bit of knowledge of French. When you describe certain objects, certain things are female, certain things are not, certain things are male, which always drove me nuts when I did. Is it la or le? I don't know. And I know Philippe's
Right,
hanging out
right.
there in the background, and he is French, so he'll correct me if I'm hideously wrong. Yeah, so John's saying newer iPhones contain AI chips, and I haven't seen the Apple thing today. I'm pretty sure there'll be some more about AI in the Apple broadcast that was done today while we've been doing this. And so John says, so do mobile phones have a gender? You know, so it starts to, now, are we going too far with this? Or,
Never. That's the whole point of this conversation, is it not?
no, I mean, no, not that we're going too far in the conversation. I mean, as we as inhabitants of this globe taking this to a degree that's just too far to be useful or practical.
Going over, like, you mean the gender thing?
Yeah, well, the pronouns, the gender thing, and we extending it too far.
I think it's definitely doing a disservice for people, because I respect everybody and how they want to identify. I just think that the more things we find to separate ourselves from one another, the more isolation we will actually have, the more depression, the more stress and anxiety. And, you know, I mean, the whole point of what I do with Inversity is to focus on what do we have in common, how we can be truly inclusive of one another. And most importantly, introspective, understanding your value and worth so that you can see it in someone else, regardless of their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, their political beliefs, their gender, their, you know, and I think that when we do go down this path of the pronouns, again, while I get it, you know, people want to have an identity so badly sometimes that there are things that they cling to. I think it could actually be doing a bit of a disservice to us as a collective.
No, I'm having that from you is extremely valuable and important, Kaz, because I know the work you do. I love the word inversity. I just wrote it down. I'm going to remember that and use that in the future. And just for some of the comments, Philippe, thank you for commenting. He says in French, they even have nouns that are male singular and female plural, which is, I'm sure there's a reason for that. And then une voiture is the car is feminine, of course, in French because of une, and then in Spanish it's male. And so it starts to become, okay, apparently, according to Mal, thank you for this, or is it Vera? I'm not sure which way around your name is placed in the chat box there, but Apple just announced, thank you, Mal. Apple just announced a new voice for Siri, which is gender neutral. So does it sound like Stephen Hawking? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, is it that type of, you know, a sort of computerized voice? I'm really, I mean, I'm now being a bit flippant here, but I'm trying to understand how that might be. And I have these conversations with my daughter because my daughter is gay. So of course I have these conversations about her preferred pronouns and how her girlfriend wants to be known. And I've been educated over the last 2 or 3 years about all these different types of descriptors, but it becomes really important when you think about programming the computers of the future that make decisions and make decisions for us, the humans, and not just the biases, but how we program them with the things that will help them make a determination based on some of the things that we may be discussing occasionally lightheartedly. So there's a few of them. John, did you want to add something to this?
I was just going to say, someone made a comment earlier, I don't remember who it was, but this is in line with what they said. I think when we stop talking about it, then I think we've reached super intelligence and we're just being controlled. Right.
That's a terrifying thought. I just
We're
want
not
to
ending on that, are we?
I want to call out some of the cool comments. I mean, this is not all of them, and I didn't write all the names down, but I was trying to copy paste them because this was flowing. And so when Giles, I'd love to come back as a participant and listen to everybody else in a future.
We'll have to organize it. We'll set it up for sure.
Yeah, so it says some of the comments that were made, I picked out. Doesn't technology reduce people's decision making by reducing memorization through laziness? I can tell you now, I can't write for toffee anymore. My handwriting is remedial at best and is incredibly poor because I've done this for so many years. So my brain has forgotten how to write neatly. My children learn cursive script when living in Belgium. They have beautiful handwriting. I was made to do lines and handwriting practice as a kid. I can't write to save my life anymore. And in fact, my hand hurts after 5 minutes. Should we be taking advice from Elon Musk about how to be human? I think we can universally agree, no. And so, hasn't bureaucracy already helped humans stop having to spend energy in making decisions so folks can just follow processes instead, no need for computers to do it for us too, which is my whole point about human engineered complexity. I think that we create, I mean, I work, many as you do, with organizations trying to solve organizational chaos and complexity, and everything that's there we're trying to fix, we created. They didn't naturally occur. We created this stuff. But what does okay, so if somebody were talking about an implication that AI or any kind of computer can have an actual experience, which is what we're talking about when we get to some sort of super artificial intelligence, where its ability to sense its environment and make those sort of, you know, gut feel, intuition type decisions, is it then, has it reached a point where it's having an experience? Interesting. I mean, we should have asked, can AI have sex? Keep that for another conversation. Is the global weather system complicated or complex? Weather forecasting is achieved by machine learning models now, and it's pretty accurate this day. So is that not something that's moved out of the complex domain to a degree into the complicated domain? Don't know. That was an interesting point I picked up. And yeah, there was a comment about, I think it was Anna said this, isn't it weird how adversarial the terms of this discussion are, either control or be controlled? Yeah, I think that was a really important point. Human awareness is an abstraction of reality. We don't actually perceive reality. That's a matrix type question, if there ever was one, or statement. Machine learning is about optimizing a cost function consciousness for the technologically singularity cloud. A crowd, should I say, not cloud, crowd. And I think this is, there's a really good question just come in about the convergence between AI and religious beliefs. Is there one, and should there be? And I know that's something scientists and physicists and many have been debating, and it all depends on what you believe as a religious belief. But I think that's another whole session, Giles, with people adequately better qualified than me to even have that conversation. And then there's a couple of last ones I picked up. The problem with biases in AI is that is a closed feedback loop. The model and the algorithms, by following the bias, create more data with biases. And they recommend the person left the comment.
Sorry, I'm sorry, David.
So check out Weapons of Mass Destruction if interested. There's obviously a book or an article on that, and you'll find it in the chat. Yeah, somebody's reminding us of Barbarella. And when I mention can AI have sex, we think of sex in human terms. But AI, and there's a lot, if you go back and read the paper that John, myself, and Dave put together, which is the substrate independence theory, we talk about once life is created, about, and information is the carrier for life, about its need to sustain its existence. A little bit about constructal law talks about every system being alive or being a living system. A river is a living system, for instance. Does it have agency? That's a different conversation. But the point is this: once something comes into existence, it tries to persist its own existence. And so there's some things in the paper you can pull from in that, because when we talk about AI, we talk about information, we talk about data, then does it get to a point where it wants to sustain its own persistence? And that then becomes a challenge, becomes a problem. So a lot of these things can, I'm done. I've stopped talking.
So is that perfect timing then to ask people if they want to use the raise hand feature, come on mic, come onto cam as well, and to ask any of the panel questions. We've had some phenomenal. In fact, what I'm going to do is, I think at some point I will save this chat. I think it's going to be the largest chat file I've ever saved in history, but I'm going to save it, and I'll probably post it up onto the meetup page afterwards so people can have access to this. It's absolutely phenomenal. Mal, good to see you, sir. Your question for the panel.
Mike.
you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and the chat was phenomenal. So I'll put some links that talk about the if AI can reproduce, and yeah, the answer is yes. It just happened, and yeah, I'm very afraid for those implications. But my question here is for just to take it back a little bit, for just in the gray zone that it's lean and all the artificial intelligence. There is a game that, if you know it, it's called I think it's called Paperclips, Universal Paperclips. It's called. I'll put a link in the chat. And what it does is it's a fabric. So it's a line of paper clips, and what you do is you just create a new paper clip, and you can automate that process. So you can say, oh, if I'm not here, just keep creating paper clips, and then the game, it's just spoiler alert, is just that the AI takes over, and just to automate the creation of paper clips, it starts trading the stock in the stock exchange, and then it's buying some companies, and then the AI, to create more paper clips, it does a space exploration just to get more minerals from space, to get the raw resources for just to create paper clips, and that is the whole game. I'll put it in the chat. So my question here is, if even with the things that we say that AI is not to go and to say the super intelligence, that we're not gonna know what it is and things like that, but just as things as just create paper clips and just automate this process. And if we give AI this connection to the internet, how is it that it's going to implicate like our systems, our processes, and how does that relate to the lean thinking approach and the things that we do in our day-to-day?
Because you use the word lean, I'm thinking, shit, I've got to answer this. I have no idea how to answer that question. My mind is completely blown. I'm just still pondering what you were saying about paper clips and the fact that the AI sort of created this entire commercial universe around, sustaining the reproduction of paper clips. You know, heaven help us if AI gets hold of something that really matters. And so the thing is this, and I've come, sorry, John, I'll give you in a second. The whole lean thinking about humans being waste, this is what I say when I talk about lean thinking, that eventually if the machines become intelligent enough to realize that we're just hopelessly wasteful and are destroying the planet on which the machines survive, they'll just eliminate us. And I mean, sci-fi becomes reality more times than not. If you look at all the things that have been talked about since the 40s, 50s and onwards through the movies, a lot of these things have become reality. So why the hell couldn't Skynet become a thing? I'm going to stop talking. John, you wanted to say something sensible.
I was just saying, so we can use these type of techniques, AI and machine learning and so forth, to run experiments or simulations, right? This would be kind of a simulation. And there's simulations or experiments in the complex domain, right? We need to run parallel experiments to make better sense of your environment and the variables involved. But we can use these for the experiments that an individual or human cannot do alone, right? So that's the advantage of using these types of programs and simulations to make sense of what could happen or what is happening in the environment. That kind of ties it back into the Caneva model, but also the substrate independence theory that we're talking about, but working in the complex domain.
I just want to pick up on something that Mike was just putting, because Mike, you really need to be on one of these panels. You really do, man. But AI would only get rid of us. He said to me, AI would only get rid of us if they deemed it necessary. They may simply leave the planet. I'll give you a tangent here. You were talking about religion and AI. Maybe AI emerges as this omniscient being, leaves planet Earth, and we remain back in hell. we become the living hell. There's something for you to ponder in the future, because, you know, it's just, why not? Somebody say something.
I don't have a
Garg.
therapist. I don't have a therapist, but I'm thinking about getting one now. Thank you, Nigel.
I'm definitely going to conclude this on a happy note. And I'm going to, like, you guys just keep it going. Well, I'm going to look up some help numbers.
Well,
Signpost.
we'll also add them to the
Samaritans in
meetup
the
page
chat.
later for everyone as well.
Hey Nigel, what if we are actually in heaven now and we just don't realize it?
I like it, David.
Ooh, you see, that's, yeah, I mean, so one of my fascinations
Or origins of life were a random accident.
Absolutely.
well, Ashley mentioned something earlier on about the infinite monkey cage. It's a BBC podcast. It's a brilliant podcast. I highly recommend it. You'll enjoy listening to it immensely. A lot of humor, a lot of incredibly deep conversations in there. But when they talked about block universe theory and lots of other things about time, and I'm a Doctor Who fan, for those that know the whole timey-wimey thing, but there is this theory that we've already lived our lives, we just can't remember them. Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Mike, you got your hand up. Tell us what you know on some of these things.
Yeah, I was actually going to come back to your religion comment. So I watched a video recently where they looked at the progression of AI. 2040, we get general AI, and sometime 300 years after that, we get super AI, which produces, between robots and AI, everything that we need. Given long enough, we become dependent on that super AI. It gives us everything that we need, like a mother providing us with all of our stuff. And in return, we pray to it because we see it now as a deity. And I can certainly see how that might happen when you become so dependent on it that it gives you everything that you want and need. I mean, I can look back, 50,000 years, 10,000 years, and see that happening in, with our species as much as I can 10,000 years from now. So yeah, it could happen.
Mike, when I think back to early religions, ones that we probably all would agree that are not, real religions now, but when you think back to civilizations 2,000-3,000 more years ago, and the things that they worship, that's actually not such a stupid statement, because what you just said makes perfect sense. And is that where we're heading, to a point where we worship the machine that we create because it then is fulfilling all our needs and then dominates and controls our lives, to go back to that controlling phrase, and some version of the Matrix emerges,
So 10,000 years ago, the argument is we prayed because we didn't understand, and so we needed something to hold on to, and maybe that was a deity. Well, if you go significantly far in the future and you don't understand how super AI does what it does, you could potentially see it as a deity as well.
In Japan, they already have preacher robots, so they're already ahead of the game there. If you haven't seen them.
Giles, Ashley, I'm conscious of time, and I know that Carrie's on a time box, so I just didn't whether you wanted to reel us all in, because I think this could go on for another hour.
Oh yeah. I mean, my mind is absolutely blown here. We set out the initial theme on exploring, will AI solve, mitigate, or worsen complexity in organizational decision-making? And I think the conclusion from this conversation is, it depends. There's a lot we don't know. Mike, you sharing the 3 types of AI, the narrow, general, and super, was really insightful. And I think the key trends coming out of this exploration, if you will, is our experiences are unique, our perceptions, our cognitions, our feelings, our biases, our heuristics, we're all unique. And adding and evolving AI onto this can potentially compound this, right? Increasing diversity within the workplace brings a lot of benefits. Adding diversity to how we shape this will hopefully help strengthen that and make systems a bit better too. And being aware of our biases and heuristics is really important so that we can act accordingly in situations, right? This conversation has been really deep. It's been a bit unnerving at times, like for me personally. And I think just a takeaway for all of us tonight or this afternoon is just reflect, take time to pause and think through the boundaries you want to draw personally to protect yourself and all of our mental health and well-being, right? Because that's really important. These conversations can be scary, but they're also really important to have because we can define and shape the rules by which we engage with technology, how we shape and build AI and evolve this. And we have power here, right? We're not powerless in this situation, but we need to have these conversations and have hard discussions and be honest and open about this, right? So on the back of this call, I'd really encourage everyone, get offline, go ground, connect with people, cuddle a dog, cuddle a human, just do whatever you need to do. Because I know this has been a bit of it's been a deep conversation for me and maybe some others as well, but this has been really insightful and interesting. I mean, like Giles said, this is the biggest chat we've ever had. So we'll export that and send that back around to everyone. But panelists, thank you so much. Giles as the co-host, thank you so much. Giles, if there are any points that you'd like to say for conclusion as well?
No, I just think, we've been doing this now since, I don't know how many years now we've been doing this and growing, and this awesome family, we call them, the community that keeps coming back time and time again, every either 2 weeks or every month, is absolutely phenomenal. And the chat tonight has just been alive. As I said, it's going to be several meg, I think, when I actually sort of click save on it at the end of the day and ultimately upload it. It is great. So just a massive thank you to Gareth, John, Nigel. We've got to have you guys back. And I've actually been creating a huge number of notes that I'm going to take away and talk to Ashley about. I think we do need a type of lean coffee on some of these subjects, or a sort of an open panel for everyone else, like Mike and David and co, who have been, really, passionate and adding the good questions and the comments in the chat to come on and actually do a lot of the talking, like Nigel has been suggesting. So, a major appreciation to everybody, the community and our panel speakers as well today. And look, if you're ever in the UK, we'd love to see you. Hopefully we'll have you back at some point in the near future as well. So thank you very much. Ashley, that I think is probably starting to wrap up for tonight. So I will just say this recording will be made available soon. We will post it on the LinkedIn message that we've got going for this thread, and it'll be posted in the meetup comments as well, so we can come back to this. But